It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, talking real estate news, property news 7 days a week, as heard on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon. Yes, we have got there. Friday morning, July the 12th today. Looking forward to heading into another weekend around Australia. Hope you've had a great week. And unit rents, now they have surged across nearly every suburb in Sydney as renters seek more affordable housing options. This, of course, amidst the cost of living crisis. The top 20 suburbs have experienced increases of 20% or more just in the last 12 months. We all know it. It's very evident. It's very clear. The trend has pushed the average unit rent in Sydney up by 2.9%, or $20 per week, to $720 in the June quarter. That's according to Domain data. Meanwhile, house rents have remained steady at a record $750 per week. Bellevue Hill. Are you a property investor that has a few investment properties there? If you have, you would have noticed the highest increase, with 35.3%, with rents reaching $2,500 per week. Other suburbs, Western Sydney suburbs, also saw notable jumps. Warwick Farm, 29.4%, South Granville and Wiley Park, both 27.3%. And then we have people like Stephen, who is a Mascot renter. He is 65 and he and his wife are facing multiple rent hikes, so much so that they are now considering moving in with their daughter due to their inability to keep up with the rising costs. Stephen, a part-time worker and carer for his wife, expressed concern over their financial stability as they draw down on their superannuation. Well, this morning on our Friday, we are going to be catching up with the Rent Fairy and founder, also the tenant advocate. This is Sarah Elkordi. She is joining us, and a very good morning to you, Sarah. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast. And like Stephen, so many people are having to relocate after compromising, aren't they, on location and quality of living. Just how bad is this from your perspective with what you are seeing?
Oh, good morning, Craig. And I think it's ridiculous at the moment. Everyone from every state is suffering, and it's getting worse, in my opinion.
The ongoing cost of the living squeeze and, of course, a shortage of dwellings, it is a concern for people being locked out of the market. How do you combat that when talking to people from your organisation, when you're talking with people that are really feeling the effects of what I've just mentioned?
Of course. In our field, a lot of people that come through are people who are at their wits' end. They have been searching for properties for months, for weeks, even sometimes for years, and they are really pushed out of the market because they can no longer afford what they would have been able to afford when they achieved their last rental property. Rents have increased so much that people are unable to afford where they are living at the moment. It is forcing people to move away from areas that they're currently living in. For example, people who are closer to the city are now moving more towards the west or the southwest or even the south because they're unable to achieve what they can afford in the area that they're currently in. So the way that we combat that is we make sure that when we're talking to our clients, we're making them understand their affordability, what's realistic and what's unrealistic, to make sure that they have the best chance of achieving a rental property in an area that is most suitable for them.
Yeah, I guess when you're talking about what is realistic, the goalposts are constantly moving, aren't they? And people are getting quite creative in seeking, this more affordable option process, which is what you're talking about. Potentially, many of them are looking at sharing homes to cut the costs. So what are you seeing around all of that sharing aspect with people? Because it's not just sharing, it's also moving over a few suburbs, maybe even to another region.
Absolutely. We have a lot of people who come in and we often ask them, what's the relationship here when it's a two-people household? And a lot of the time it's, I actually don't know this person. We're just going to live with each other, as they found each other on flatmates.com, or they spoke to each other when they were out and they were both struggling in actually affording rent. And to me, it sounds like a good idea. I mean, if you look online, a Surrey Hills 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1-car space is $750 a week. But if you look at a 2-bedroom, it's $950 a week. And obviously you do the maths, you half that, you're actually saving costs by living with someone.
I was saying the other day, there's this Netflix series on Roommates from Hell. I watched it last week. Very scary process. Nothing funny about it because, boy, there's been some fatalities with what has happened. I wonder actually whether this is a real stress point for a lot of people, because a lot of people don't want to share their space. Let's get real. People like their privacy. I mean, who wants to share a space in the first place? But it's forced upon them with regard to just the way the living cost has gone. So they're having to do it and probably adding to their stress levels. That's something you've got to be seeing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Not everybody wants to do it. I mean, me personally, I wouldn't want to do it. But it's just, we're at a point now where can you go and afford a $750 a week property if you're on one single income? Or is it better for you to half the cost of rent by living with someone else? You can't afford, it's not realistic. Wages aren't going up. People can't afford rent anymore. It's either move back in with family, move state. I even had a girl, she lived in Sydney, couldn't afford the rent anymore. She's moved to Bali. People are moving. If you move to Queensland, it might be a little bit cheaper to get a house, but that means picking up your life and moving state. It's hard for people to do. So they're doing what they can do in order to survive and be able to put a roof over their head, and sharing is what we're coming down to at the moment.
All right, we are talking to Sarah, the rent fairy. We'll come back and we'll talk more rental properties and what people are doing to survive and find their own space. We'll do that next.
We help to break down real estate every day to help you better understand the Australian property market.
And right now it is time for another 30-second property tip. We are going back to Melbourne this morning. And good morning to you, Michael. What have you got for us this morning?
Very good morning. My property tip is around people bidding at auction and potentially bidding this weekend at auction is to have a plan. I mean, that might sound pretty obvious, but the plan I recommend is to never end on a round number. So many of the auctions I call and so many from my team that we see that someone will have a budget in their mind, which they should, and then end on it. We're talking whether it's $1 million, if it's $2 million, or even if it's $500,000. The amount of property we see knocked down to a successful bidder who just has another $3,000 or another $5,000, so that property price potentially becomes $2 million and $5,000, and they stop the competition because they have had that round number in their head.
You can join the conversation every week on the Real Estate Podcast.
And it is a Real Estate Friday, the very best day of the week. Looking at heading into another weekend around Australia, we are talking to Sarah Elkordi. She is the Rent Fairy. She's the owner and founder. That was pretty interesting just before the break. You were saying that you had somebody, she decided, I can't afford Sydney, I'm going to move to Bali. We did mention that a couple of weeks ago, that it's not one-offs where people have decided to go to cheaper countries to live.
Yeah, well, now that work can be remote and sometimes you can work from wherever you can, it's easier to just go and live overseas at this point, and it's cheaper. And if you're out of the rental market and you can't afford it, this is what's happening.
Yeah, and the Rent Fairy, I guess you should tell us a little bit about your organisation and what it is that you do there.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, we assist with the whole process of securing rental properties Australia-wide. So includes searching and sourcing of rental properties, liaising with the agents, the application process, so putting it together and submitting, and then viewing inspection. So that comes in handy if you are moving interstate. We can actually go and inspect the property prior to you putting an application in to make sure it is up to the highest standard.
It sounds like you're pretty busy. It's a space where it's got a lot of growth. I mean, this has just been a crazy growth phase. It doesn't really look like it's going to slow down. There's no easy answer. There's no easy fix here.
No, I don't think it's going to slow down. I mean, we started this 4 years ago, the rent fairy, and it was crazy then, and that was the peak of COVID. And it's only gotten busier. People need assistance with figuring out how to get rental property and what's going to work best for them. And then that's where we come in.
Coming back to the stress point of all of this, you get people that get in contact with you, they're at their wits' end. They just don't know what to do. And then you've got to, I guess, look at what they can afford. Now that you're outside representing other areas outside of Sydney, at least you're able to steer them into another state, another region, if that's what they're wanting to do.
Absolutely. So we really work closely with our clients, and we'll go through their applications, through their, affordability, their criteria, and then make sure that we're having that very realistic. And sometimes it's a hard conversation to have because people don't want to hear it. But we have to be honest with them and say, look, this is achievable, this is not achievable, but why don't we try and look at this area or this state or change your application in a different way? Because sometimes it's just a matter of they don't have their application put together properly, and that changes the whole process.
And just one other point, and that is in terms of somebody's history, do you have people where I guess sometimes you have the stress, you have the odd blowout, there's some bad comments that are against their name. That must be very, very difficult trying to place some people when there are so many options for landlords to choose from and rental companies.
Absolutely. So sometimes, people do, especially during COVID, there was financial hardship for everyone and you were behind in your rent. And obviously it shows up on your ledger. But I think having an honest conversation with the agents and showing other strengths in your application is always a good thing when submitting applications. But we're the ones where they are constantly in rental arrears and their ledger is not strong. And even if they are still in rental arrears, we actually work with them and put a plan in place with their financials to make sure that they pay off any rental debt prior to us actually starting to commence on looking for a new property.
All right then, Sarah, great to find out what you're doing. I do like the name, the Rent Fairy. It says it all, really. And thank you so much for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning, and have a great Friday and a great weekend.
Thank you for having me.
Every morning from 6 a.m. across Australia, we deliver you the latest property news, commentary and predictions from Perth to Cairns and from Melbourne to Brisbane, 7 days a week, only on the Real Estate Podcast.
Maybe they had a limit and they've said, no, to hell with this. We're going to ramp it up a little bit more. If it's going to cost us an extra $50,000 to get the right property, let's just buy it.
We certainly feel that has been the case on some of the properties that we have seen sell, because when you find an objective value or you assess the objective value of a property, we're seeing many properties sell well above where they should sell based on that emotional buying. So yes, there's definitely been a sense of, people are fed up, they're wanting to stretch because they're sick of looking or they're sick of missing out. And so every time they miss out, they become more motivated to stretch that little bit more for the next property.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.